without further ado, I think we can, there we go. All right, there's Mr. James Suntres joining us. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Terry. Good morning, everybody. Actually, no, so we have somebody from the UK and from Poland.
Yes, very good. I'm taking a look on the Facebook stream as well.
Yeah, so hello, Edita from Poland. And I didn't see there was somebody from the UK there.
And
Anyway.
I did see that someone is from Kalamata. So good morning, Dimitra from Kalamata, from my neck of the woods here. So James, thank you very much. I am going to pop up your presentation here and give the floor over to you.
Okay, well, good morning, everybody. It's really something to sacrifice a Sunday morning, but we still have time to go to the beach, although it's not really great beach going weather today. We're going to be talking about the ECCE, ECPE writing. My subtitle is The Importance of Genre, and hopefully you'll understand the significance of my subtitle by the time we finish. As you know, the other seminars we have, like people ask questions as I go along, and I don't stop to answer these questions. A lot of them are pretty valid because it just disrupts my flow. So if you do have a question, write it down, and we will have a Q&A at the end. And I also provide my email if you have any questions. But also, a lot of people ask questions, and then subsequently these questions are answered. So save if you have a question, write it down. Probably your question might be answered as I go along, and if it's not, then ask at the Q&A. So without further ado, let's begin. I'd like to begin with a review of the changes. I know we talked about this just last week, actually, but just good to review these changes. So on the ECC, we no longer have that long article that students have to read before they choose their two topics. I think it did away with that a while ago, but still, it's no longer a part of the rubrics. There are two topics to choose from, and the instructions say letter, email, article, or essay. But there's no real difference actually whether and I'll explain. There's a reason why I say letter, email, article, essay. Basically, we're talking about expository writing. And whether we're dealing with the ECC or the ECP, the writing is expository. Whether it's an email, letter, essay, what students have to be aware of is the format they have to adhere to, taking into account their purpose, which is what the genre approach is all about. And all examinations are based on this, and all academic writing, if you will, is based on this. Students choose one topic and have 30 minutes to complete the task, so nothing new there. The greatest change in the writing section is that of the ECPE, which now includes a visual. There are 3 visuals. Could be a chart, a graph, a very short announcement, a news item, and then students again have 2 topics to choose from. And in the writing, they have to use information from at least one of these 3 visuals. Okay, so in anticipation of your question, yes, they do have to use information from at least one of the visual to have relevance to their writing. And students have 45 minutes to complete the task. And now people might think, oh, 45 minutes to complete the task. That means it's easier. No, because they have more information to process. So the actual writing time, I'll argue, is the same. There's no difference. And the level of difficulty is the same. B2 level for ECC, C2 level for the proficiency. My purpose this morning, well, what I'm not going to do, I'm not going to provide extensive teaching tips in writing. That we don't have time for that, and I don't, we have to do more on a face-to-face workshop type setting if you want something like that. And I'm not going to give classroom activities and extra resources because we're talking about 2 different exams, ECC and ECP. So there are different types of activities you do for one and the other. And I'm not going to go over the Kamler evaluation rubric, which you can download, and I'm going to provide the links at the end of my talk, but just go to Michigan Language Assessment, just go to the CAMLA website. Everything is there. Past, sample examinations, writing, evaluation rubrics for the speaking, for the writing. Everything is there. Just go there. But if you want to get an even better understanding of what students are expected to produce at the corresponding levels at B2, C2, go to the Common European Framework. All testing organizations use references, use the language, use the rubrics of the Common European Framework for evaluating the different language, the different parts of their examination. So you can download it, have it on your desktop, and everything is there in the Common European Framework. I am going to explain the basic rationale for the ECCE, ECPE writing sections. Both examinations are a reflection of the exact same rationale. This is, again, basically what I mentioned last time, that even more than in the past, the ECCE and the ECPE are very, very similar. Difference in level, but as far as the rationale, as far as how language is tested, the types of activities, they're very, very more similar now than they were in the past. I'm going to provide some basic principles that apply to all extensive expository writing for any and all examinations. Okay, I need to stress this. There's no such thing as ECC writing and FC writing. No such thing. There's no such thing as Cambridge Proficiency writing and TOEFL writing and IELTS writing. Writing is writing. We're writing to present our ideas in an academic context, if you will. No matter what examination we're talking about, it's exactly the same. In fact, we could change, from ECC, ECPE writing, the importance of genre, and replace, choose ECC and ECPE and replace that with any examination of your choice. And what I'm saying is perfectly valid for any language examinations to have an extensive writing component. But we are going to set the groundwork for future seminars if any of you would be interested for that, if you need a little more support and information. So what is the genre approach that these examinations are based on? In the genre approach, we help students understand the importance of having a purpose. Students have to have a reason when writing, and the reason for writing will decide the organization of their text. And students also have to be aware of their readers' expectations. And, this is what writing is all about, right? I don't write in a vacuum. I write taking into account what my purpose is and what my readers' expectations are. Students are presented with the teachable exemplars, nothing new here. We're not talking about reinventing the wheel. And then students are provided with a framework that facilitates the writing process, that helps them understand how to organize their ideas. One of the main arguments against the genre approach is that it stifles creativity. Students do not become phenomenal writers through the genre approach. They don't. They become effective writers. They become good writers. They don't become great writers. And I will agree with you. I mean, go to the any examination organization, and they have examples of student writing, and some of the really the best writing that from these examinations. The students, that writing doesn't even reflect what we're going to talk about today. But these are obviously gifted students. They're really great writers, and maybe to be a great writer is not something that you can be taught. It's talent that people have, and our hope is if we help our students become good writers, then gradually they'll be able to build on this themselves and become great writers. But our goal is to help them become effective so that they can succeed in not so much in passing the exam, but in being able to convey their ideas in a professional academic context. And this is what the genre approach is all about. Now, the steps that are followed, and these are the steps followed, as I said, in preparing for any examination that has a writing component. We begin with step one, model. I know this is like old news for many of you. are really experienced. But it doesn't hurt to review and say why these different steps are important. So bear with me, please. We have a model, and we analyze this model text, and we analyze it with our focus being on organization and how topic is developed. And interestingly, if you go, I encourage you, go to the CAMLA rubrics, evaluation rubrics, or any examination rubrics, or the Common European Framework, and you'll see what is very, very prominent is this: the ability to organize the text and to develop the topic appropriately. So I mean, this is genre, but it's like very much it's like teaching and testing and language use kind of like converging together. Students have to be able to, they have to learn to see the connection between organization, topic development, and the writer's purpose. I'll give you some specific examples of this shortly, but I'm sure those of you who are a little more savvy and experienced, you probably see what I mean. Not only does the text itself have to have a clear purpose, but the paragraphs within the text have to have a very clear purpose. And we also, of course, have to focus on more discrete details, like number of examples used, for example. I always tell my students, no more than 2, 3 maybe maximum, but sometimes, students write and have one example after another, they just lose control. I remind my students, if you have a point that you want to, support your point, all you need is one really carefully chosen example, and it's enough. If you have more, feel the need to have more examples, then probably the position you're taking is even untenable. You don't really believe what you're writing. So 1, 2 carefully chosen examples, all you need. What types of linkers we should use? For example, there are certain types of linkers, for example, you never use in the opening paragraph or the closing paragraph, for example. For example, we never use that in the opening or the closing paragraphs. We're not giving examples. In the opening paragraph, we're stating our purpose. Closing paragraph, we're like rounding things off. We're not presenting new information. These are the sorts of things we talk about with students, and of course, stylistic things like register, which is perhaps an issue, not so much in the ECC, but more so in the ECPE and these upper level language examinations. Step 2, we have focused practice, and here we provide students with a variety of activities, helping them to develop an understanding of organization of the text based on its purpose. We do practice various rhetorical devices to generate this fluent flow of ideas, and again, go back to the rubrics, and you'll see that this concept of fluency in writing is a very, very prominent feature. We work on discourse markers, reference singles, participle clauses, appropriate use of linking expressions. Linking expressions, Greek learners tend to overuse them. It seems, I'm sure all of you have read essays where every single sentence begins with a linking expression. And I would sometimes I would have students write their essays. I say use no linking expressions, because if your ideas, if there's cohesion and coherence, and and one idea kind of like logically follows the next, you don't even need linking expressions, because the relationship between ideas is very, very clear. Using a linking expression does not add clarity, as a matter of fact, and this is one thing students should, it adds emphasis, I guess, but not so much clarity. One of my pet peeves is use of participles and participle clauses, which really help this flow of ideas, and students don't seem to use them. Again, the fault lies too in what happens, what we do as teachers. Mea culpa, I'm guilty of this myself. I mean, how often have we had students practice on a grammar activity? They write a paragraph and we say, okay, put these linking expressions in the appropriate space, or write a paragraph using, for example, in other words, using linking expressions that introduce examples. So the point of the exercise is not to express ideas, but to use language. And which brings me to the next point, that quite often that's what students do. They don't write to express their ideas. They write to prove that they know the language. Hence, you see needless verbosity, needlessly long sentences. using language for the sake of just show how rich my vocabulary is, but not so much to express myself. And here I strongly suggest that you read, this is a really great article by George Orwell, Politics and the English Language. And in it, George Orwell talks about how people write in order to needlessly obfuscate ideas, in order to mislead readers. And he finishes off this article with 12 rules, like ways to make your writing clearer. And the rules include things like use shorter sentences. A sentence should be only as long as it needs to be. Use simple words. Like, why'd say obfuscate? I could have said confuse. He wrote, people write in order to confuse readers. Why'd say obfuscate, for example? So strong, and these 12. Maybe the article itself is not so. It's not so. It won't be so understandable for most of our students. But it finishes off with 12 or 13 very interesting rules, and I think you should go over these rules with your students because they really are guidelines to become an effective writer. And students should have this sense of confidence in their writing and in their ideas. There's no such thing as a bad idea. All ideas are valid. Quite often students are worried about this. Well, what if they don't like my ideas? No, all ideas are valid. All ideas are valid. I mean, there's no such thing as an invalid idea. And then we look at the process. And here, of course, this is, briefly what you can do in the classroom. Okay, if you probably already do this, but, you discuss a topic, brainstorm. One interesting thing, this came up with a previous seminar. One of the teachers, what she does, there's a topic and she knows they're going to be doing this topic in the classroom. She has students do some background reading on the topic, read up about this, get some ideas, which I think is brilliant. And then, so you can do this, I forget this girl's name. It's unfortunate. It's a brilliant idea. So have students, do some background reading, and then in the classroom brainstorm. What have you learned about this topic? And you write these ideas on the board, and you keep the ideas on the board. And then once you've got the ideas on the board, then you decide on how the topic will be addressed. And that's where we establish our purpose. Is it a problem to be solved? Is it an issue to be resolved? An explanation of why something is right or wrong, etc. Students should organize their ideas in the classroom based on their purpose. They write their first draft in class. They go over this first draft as a group, make sure that their ideas and their writing is understandable to one another. And then for homework, they go home and they write their composition, their essay, call it what you will. And then the finished product, well, the almost finished product, because it never finishes. You can always write and rewrite and polish and improve, But say the almost finished product, if you don't have time, then you collect the writing and you go over it. But as you're reading students' writing, focus on their ideas. Don't focus on their language mistakes. Focus on their ideas. And if they've made some mistakes that don't disrupt the flow of ideas, ignore them. Really, because your purpose is not to correct their language. Your purpose is to see how effective they convey their ideas. And I argue that, and this is what experience has taught me, students have written this essay. And here is where you're going to have a one-on-one on a student. If a student's written an essay and it's got a lot of language problems, correcting these language problems is worse than a waste of time. Because you have to talk to the student. And here's why. If a student has written something and it's got a lot of language issues, you have to sit down with the student and you have to ask the student, what were you trying to say here? Because I can't figure it out. If the student says to you, well, because I've got so many things on my plate. I've got my high school, I've got sports, I've got so much. I got my parents badgering about this, that, and the other. I'm overwhelmed. I don't know what I was trying to say. I don't. Well, correcting that language mistake is pointless. It's not even going to register. It's a waste of your time, the student's time. If the student doesn't know what he or she is trying to say, then it's pointless. If the student, though, usually like 99% of the time they do know, yeah, well, this is what I was trying to say. And quite often, when students say what they meant, they correct their own mistake. You see? I argue that if I'm clear about my ideas, I will not make a language mistake, or I'll make fewer language mistakes. Language mistakes in writing stem from lack of clarity in my ideas. And poor writing is a result of lack of clarity in my ideas. That's one of the rules of writing. Of course, if you do have time, you should do this with all your students. Have a one-on-one. And I've seen myself phenomenal results with students who they would write an essay and it would be, terrible. We'd have this one-on-one, and they'd come back to me within a week, and their writing would be phenomenal because they've clarified their ideas. So in writing, again, to recap here, I cannot say it enough. Serious language mistakes result from a lack of clarity in what I'm trying to say. So correcting these language mistakes, unless the student knows what he or she is trying to say, is pointless, I think. Okay, that's my opinion, humble opinion. Now, one very important element of the genre approach is our reason for writing, and our reason for writing decides on how we organize our text. Now, in anticipation of your question, do we write an essay or a letter or an article or proposal or this? As many of you probably know, I was with the HEU for the longest time, and I was very much involved in promoting and in helping teachers and prepare for the ECCE, ECPE, and developing materials for the ECCE and ECPE. And I've been to in the 90s, I was going back to the University of Michigan countless times. They're talking about this. I asked them, what makes you decide whether something's an essay or a letter or an email and they said to me, it's very arbitrary almost. They call something an essay to facilitate more mature learners. They call something a letter to facilitate more younger learners, because if you specify what something is, then the person who's going to be the writing visualize a potential reader, and this visualizing a potential reader facilitates the writing process. Now, if you write an article, it means, I'm writing for a newspaper, and probably members of my community will be reading this. If I'm writing a letter, I'm addressing to a specific person, that sort of thing. If I'm writing an essay, well, I'm a university student, so I'm used to writing essays, so I feel comfortable doing this. So, letter, essay, proposal, email, this is almost irrelevant. The important thing is this here, my reasons for writing. And there are 4 identifiable reasons for writing as far as, academic writing is concerned in its entirety, but more so for the ECCE and ECPE. And it says all language, TOEFL, call it what you will. Our first reason for writing, it's not in any order of hierarchy. Well, one reason is to express an opinion. And when I'm writing to express an opinion, in each of these cases, I have an opening paragraph. And the opening paragraph in each of these types of writing is I state my purpose. I'm writing to express an opinion on this issue, and these are the 2 opinions I'm going to develop. Or I'm writing to provide a solution to this problem. Here are the 2 solutions I'm going to propose, etc. In the case of our first example, in one paragraph, I devote it to one opinion. In the other paragraph, to the second opinion and my conclusion. When I'm dealing with a problem, I present the problem in my opening paragraph, very briefly how I understand it, one solution, and then another solution, and then a very brief conclusion. Which of these 2 solutions is the most appropriate? Pros and cons, arguably, this is like an opinion type essay, but because so often, topics are worded in this vein, like what are the advantages and disadvantages of whatever, I think it deserves its own category, if you will. Again, our introduction, and then one paragraph for the advantages, another paragraph for disadvantages. Doesn't matter what you deal with first, and their conclusion. And the final type of writing, this used to be pretty common in the past. I haven't seen it recently, but still, it doesn't hurt to look at it in case students encounter it. It's a personal experience, and here we have again our opening paragraph where we touch on the issue and we introduce our experience very, very briefly. Then we talk about what this experience is, And then in the third paragraph, why this experience is relevant regarding your topic, why it proves or disproves the topic, say, and our conclusion. And this, in a nutshell, is the genre approach. Now, no topic inherently belongs to any of these categories. The student can decide when asked to deal with something. Like, for example, the advantages, disadvantages. Student might say, well, you know what, as far as this user is concerned, I see only advantages, and here's why. So he's expressing an opinion. He doesn't even talk about a disadvantage because he says, I don't see disadvantages. I see only advantages. So that's what he signaled to his reader. So if he says, I don't see any disadvantages, then he shouldn't mention them in his essay because he's just, you know, or vice versa. So here I have a couple of examples. One is from the ECCE. And these are from the CAMLA website, so you can go and download this. I'll let you just have a look at this very briefly. Okay, so you'll see it's somebody, you know, advantage and disadvantage of studying abroad. So I have an introduction, very brief introduction. One paragraph, the advantages of studying in a foreign country. Another paragraph, the disadvantages, and a very brief conclusion. And then we have this piece of writing, which is from the proficiency. And just by looking at how it's been organized, you see like, wow, this is like the exact same organization. So again, you know, how the two exams, and you know, writing is writing irrespective of the level in the examination. Again, advantages and disadvantages. In this case, it's, I guess, using digital technology to stay connected. Very brief introduction. First paragraph 2, disadvantages, paragraph 3, the advantages, and a very brief conclusion. I'm not going to, you don't have to read the thing I want you to focus here is how these texts have been developed and organized. And yes, they do have their problems, and you know, the universe, the CAMLA, they've even selected to include the spelling mistakes. These aren't typos when you do download these, they're the actual spelling mistakes that they've retained. And the good thing here is to show that, yes, you can make mistakes. There's no dichotomy. You have to write perfectly or not at all. No, it's not. You have to write effectively. And these are very good examples of this. So what we see here, we see that, you know, literally the ECCE is a precursor to the ECPE. Although these two pieces of writing are two different levels, they have the same purpose, pros and cons of something. They have similar organization. They're a reflection, obviously, of the same exemplar, and it's obvious that these students were taught in a very similar way. And I wouldn't be surprised if they might even be from the same school. So here are some concerns, though. Concern number one, and this, I said, is not only writing for the ECC, writing for the ECPE. This is like writing for any, you know, in any type of context. This time I've always thought about, can someone who has problems writing an L1 become an effective writer in L2? And you know, maybe the answer is yes, maybe not. I don't know, but you know, if somebody isn't an effective writer in their own language, then we have you know, quite a task ahead of us to help them become effective writers in a foreign language. Also, is it possible to be an effective writer if one doesn't do a lot of extensive reading? This, of course, I'd say it's a rhetorical question, because I think the answer is no. And you know, no one does extensive reading anymore. I mean, I find it interesting. I go to the beach, and everybody has their phones, and very, very few people have an actual book. And you know, the phone is an excellent example of where we do most of our reading: short texts on a small surface. You know, we do have to get students to do more extensive reading, even in their own language, if they are going to become effective writers. You cannot be a writer unless you read. I found one. This is not a digression. I should have included this. I don't know if you're familiar with PISA. I'll write it in my comment section. Project for International Student Assessment by the OECD. It's the Project for International Student Assessment for the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, and what they do this every 3 years. The recent one came out in 2018, and the results for 2018 were published 2019. It looks at 15-year-olds, in 50, 60 countries. Greece is always participates. And, Greek 15-year-olds, they're not too good when it comes to, literacy. Most of them aren't effective, extensive writers in their own language. They don't do a lot of reading. We are in good company, though. 15-year-olds in the States aren't much better, though. And then, we're not the worst country, but we're nowhere near the top. Countries like Finland, Canada, they're always way up there. Singapore, surprisingly. So we have our work cut out for us. And also, another concern is, do we do enough writing as teachers to be able to teach writing? I mean, if you don't do a lot of writing yourself, how can you teach it? There are so many. Keep a journal. Go to Facebook or whatever and write an extensive post, which most people won't read, but you're writing it for yourself, and you'll get some sort of result, some sort of response. Usually somebody who very vociferously disagrees with you and will trash you, but still, that's a response, right? Anyway, there are different things we can do as teachers to start writing ourselves. And, oops, what is that? Where's my, there we go. Thank you. Here are my references, just a couple of references here. The link to get the ECC writing scale and ECP writing scale. I strongly recommend that you also look at the rubric, the scale on the Common European Framework for B2 level and for C2 level for writing, which will give you an even fuller understanding. But you'll see, if you look at these writing scales and look at what we just talked about, the genre approach, you'll see that very much in tandem, as I said. And thank you. My email, our website, we have a couple of books out with the revisions, which will start applying in May 2021. And well, now we're open for questions, I guess. Well, I don't know. Well, I guess I'll how do we separate paragraphs? One whole blank line or something else? You can separate. Yes, a question from Dionisi. A line or indentation. Yeah, but they have to be, paragraphs have to be clearly separated. That's that goes without saying. But either students should learn to indent or put a line between paragraphs. Either way is fine. Okay. Terry? We lost Terry. Well, I don't know. So there he is. Hey, there you go.
You'll never lose Terry, unfortunately.
I'm beginning to panic.
No, I'm always here. Always the silent voice here. So we got some questions here. I'm ready to publish. So
is there a word limit? Eleni, there is no word limit. No, there is no word limit. Students have 30 minutes to write in the ECC. Same amount of time, writing time in the ECP, no word limit. The important thing is to complete the activity. And why do they have no word limit? length again, no, length is irrelevant because when back in the day, we're talking about the 1980s. When I first, they had a word limit, but then students go back and they count and would describe the flow of ideas. So no word limit. I don't think there's a word limit for any examination for that matter. So is the ECP beginning to look like IELTS writing? Writing is writing. There's no such thing as IELTS writing or ECP writing or Cambridge writing. Writing is writing. And, the format might change, how the topic is presented. Rubrics might change, but the final outcome is exactly the same. Again, what about proposals in the ECPE, Katerina? It's again that call it a proposal, call it an essay, call it an email, call it a letter. It's irrelevant. It's what I talked about earlier. Am I writing to express an opinion? Am I writing to provide a solution to a problem? Advantages, disadvantages. I mean, that's what we should focus on with our students. Does it matter whether they express opinion? Okay. As I said, if you are adherent of the genre approach, our opening paragraph, we state what's at issue very, very briefly. One sentence. One sentence, we present our one opinion. One sentence, we present our other opinion. And maybe a closing sentence so we can kind of segue into the main body. One paragraph, we express one opinion. One paragraph, we express another opinion. Very brief closing paragraph where we state of these two opinions, the one which I think is the most valid. Yeah, and that's it in a nutshell. You can if you want, but it's not really that much of an issue. It's not. Don't let them tire themselves. Just waste time to think about an appropriate title. If they can come up with one, fine. If not, it's not an issue. In some books in the writing section, it's suggested. Okay, let's see this. Georgia. Hello, Georgia. In some books in the writing section, it's suggested that an advantage there should always be both advantages and disadvantages, that it should be balanced, otherwise it won't be. No, I disagree with that. That's what I mean. If you see, the writer states his or her purpose. If you see that there are no advantages to something, then how can you'll just be forcing yourself, and then they'll just, the writing will be contrived. You won't, if you don't agree with something, you can't write. I went back to this goes back to what I said earlier. Very, very important. Ideas. Students should never be forced to express ideas they disagree with, to express ideas that they feel uncomfortable with. Never do this. If students think, if there's a disadvantage, advantage of whatever, and the student says, well, miss or sir, I see only advantages here. Well, that's what you're going to write, and it's fine. It's perfectly fine. Do you think mind maps are a good idea? I've been, Katerina, just time consuming. However, I always find them helpful. Do whatever you find helpful, Katerina. There's no such thing as a good idea or a bad idea. I might do something in the classroom and it'll work, and you might do it and it won't work, and then you'll do something that gets phenomenal results, and I'll do it and I'll completely fail at it. So if something works for you, do it. It's I'm not, when it comes to teaching, I'm not at all dogmatic. It's no, whatever helps the students learn, do it. Even using their own language, do it. Why is it Macrina, that's a very, that goes back to what I said earlier with PISA. Your typical 15-year-old, and let's face it, the average age of a person sitting for the ECPE is 15 or 16. It's gotten that low. Your average 15, 16-year-old has trouble writing in their own language. This is according to the PISA results. So if I have trouble writing in my own language, I'm going to have trouble writing in a foreign language. It's interesting, if I don't like doing this. I just had a board here, right on my wall here. But if you've seen, there's a bell curve, right? And what is a bell curve? It's something like this. Okay, imagine it's this. Okay, yes, I love you all. It's this bell curve is like this. Let me get my okay. And what it is this is how people perform on an exam. Okay, and so there's my bell curve. Oh, there's my bell curve. And let's say that there's a line about here. Okay. And in typical examinations, 65 to 70% of students pass, 35 to 30% of students fail. Okay, this is all of these language examinations, okay? In Greece, though, we have a very interesting bell curve. It's more like this, okay? And it's more like this, and there's a cutoff mark, okay, where this is basically the case on the proficiency, where most students, like 50%, 40, 50% of students pass, 50, 60% of students fail. Those that pass barely pass, those that fail barely fail. So there's a greatest chunk of students are at this lower level. Very, very few perform optimally, as opposed to other countries where 20% of students perform optimally. And if you go back to the PISA results, when it comes to extensive reading, 20% of students are really good extensive readers. In Greece, only 5% of students, according to PISA, are good at extensive reading in their own language. So if we go back to what we said earlier, there's the direct connection, correlation between extensive reading and writing. If I don't do extensive reading, I'm not going to be an effective writer, even in my own language. So that's why. Dionysius' refutation paragraph is, you're not really refuting anything, really. I mean, when you're expressing an opinion, you're saying, opening paragraph, here's one opinion, one way of looking at things, here's another way of looking at things, and then your closing paragraph, based on these two opinions, this is what I believe. So you don't really refute anything, I think. The visual on the, if you go to Camla and download the, or go, if better still, go to, I think it's still online, the our previous seminar. I have an example of the rubric. So it's just 3, kind of like squares, chart, graph, short statement, and this is what the visual looks like. And students choose one of these visuals, and they refer to one of these visuals when they write. So there you go.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody, for the questions. I just wanted to point out that if you want to ask a question, you must put a question mark at the end. Otherwise, the system here does not recognize, there we go, it does not recognize it as a question, and then we can't have this fancy visual here for everyone to see. So just make sure with your questions, put a question mark at the end, because otherwise we get lots of comments and it's hard to see which ones are questions and which ones are just, thank you, hello, etc. Let's get a few more questions in for James. And,
okay, so,
then we'll sign off.
No opposing opinion. Well, no, I mean, what do you mean by, what is meant by opposing opinion? I mean, it's not, there's no, the student doesn't clarify what his or her opinion is until the closing, the end of the, the closing paragraph. So, importance, as I say, of a topic sentence beginning each paragraph and the last sentence being a hint as to what the next paragraph will. But your explanations were very clear. There may be a question regarding the importance of the topic sentence. Here we're entering into the realm of more specific focus classroom practice, classroom activities. In a nutshell, yeah, I mean, if you want to teach students to be effective writers, you do have to, the topic sentence is very briefly, with the genre approach, pretty straightforward. Opening paragraph, people think that social media is bad for young people. Okay, as with everything, social media has advantages and disadvantages. This is what I'm going to talk about in my essay. Next paragraph. First of all, let's look at the advantages of social media. There's your topic sentence. Third paragraph. Now let's explore the disadvantages. There's your topic sentence. Simple as that. Very straightforward, actually.
Okay. Well, James, thank you very, very much for the wonderful presentation, as always. And thank you for everyone for joining us this Sunday morning. And we look forward to having some more webinars in the very, very near future. So please, everybody, keep your eye open and on our social media, and we will inform you of our next upcoming live webinars. So thank you again, James.
Thank you.
And thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful Sunday.
Yeah,
Goodbye.
take care. Take care, Terry. Bye.